Just like my ex-girlfriend's bum, Florida is the flattest state in the United States. Its highest point is only 345 feet above sea level, which is lower than some buildings. While the Sahara is the largest hot desert in the world, Antarctica is actually the largest desert overall. Pretty surprising, right? Well, it's because deserts aren't just about sand. They're defined by how little precipitation they get. Even though there's tons of ice, some parts of Antarctica get less than 2 inches of rain or snow each year. That 2 inches is pretty big, right? Believe it or not, Australia is wider than the moon. The continent stretches almost 2,500 miles across, or about 4,000 kilometers, while the moon's diameter is just 2,100 miles, or just under 3,500 kilometers. Most people think Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, but that's not entirely true. Everest is the highest above sea level, but measured from its base at the bottom of the ocean, Mauna Kea in Hawaii is taller than Everest. Texas is larger than every country in Europe except Russia, and Dallas, Texas is home to one of the worst American football teams in recent years. Anyways, if Texas was its own nation, it would be the 39th largest in the world, ahead of countries like France and Germany. Covering over 2.5 million square miles, the Amazon basin could fit 17 United Kingdoms in it. A small village in Japan with few residents is filled with hundreds of life-sized dolls that were placed there by a local artist. The dolls are meant to represent the people who once lived there. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like that's about as creepy as it gets. Anyways, Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula has thousands of natural sinkholes filled with crystal clear water. These were sacred to the ancient Maya, and they're popular swimming and diving spots. The Everglades is the only place on Earth where alligators and crocodiles coexist. Russia is so big that its surface area is larger than the surface area of Pluto. Who knew a country could outsize a dwarf planet? Although it's supposedly sacred, the Ganges River in India is one of the most polluted rivers in the world. Sadly, it's filled with industrial waste and untreated sewage. Antarctica has a strange bright red waterfall called Blood Falls that looks like it's oozing blood out of the ice. The red color comes from iron-rich water that turns red when it hits the air. It's one of the many weird and wonderful features of this icy continent. There's a haunted forest in Romania that some people call the Bermuda Triangle of Transylvania. People report strange lights, weird sounds, and even ghost sightings there. When it comes to the sheer number of bears, Alaska takes the crown. It's home to a thriving population of both black bears and grizzly bears, as well as polar bears in the Arctic regions. But aside from Alaska, California has the largest black bear population in the United States, and Montana has the most grizzly bears. Even though size doesn't even matter, Russia is so big that it spans 11 time zones. So that means when people in one part are eating breakfast, those who live in different parts are getting ready for bed. It's tricky to get exact numbers on mountain lions, but Colorado likely has the largest population, while California and Oregon have stable populations as well. In Norway, there's a town that doesn't get any sunlight in winter because it's surrounded by mountains. They have to use giant mirrors to reflect sunlight into the town. Brazil has a prison where inmates can reduce their sentence by reading. The prison calls it redemption through reading, and for every book they read and write a report on, prisoners get 4 days off their sentence. The Amazon is the second longest river in the world after the Nile. They're comparable in length, but the Nile is just over 4,100 miles, which is a bit longer than the Amazon, which is about 4,000 miles long. Mount Everest grows by about 4 millimeters every year because of tectonic plate movement. Millions of years ago, the Amazon River actually flowed in the opposite direction compared to today. The Missouri River is the longest river in North America and the fourth longest in the world, running over 2,300 miles. It starts in the Rocky Mountains and it joins the Mississippi River near St. Louis, and they flow all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. Around 6,000 years ago, the Sahara Desert wasn't a desert at all. It was a green, thriving place full of lakes, grasslands, and animals. This lush landscape, part of what's called the African humid period, dried up over time as the Earth's tilt shifted. Today, the Sahara is the largest hot desert in the world, but its history shows just how much landscapes can change. Canada has so many lakes that it actually has more than the rest of the world combined, over 2 million. Most of these were carved out by glaciers during the last ice age, leaving behind an incredible amount of fresh water. Canada now holds 60% of the world's natural lakes. Africa is the only continent that stretches across the northern, southern, eastern, and western hemispheres. This unique position means it has a diverse range of climates, from deserts to rainforests. San Antonio hosts the largest bat colony on Earth, with over 20 million Mexican free-tailed bats. Iceland is growing by a few centimeters every year because it sits on two tectonic plates that are slowly pulling apart. The North American and Eurasian plates create new land in the middle as magma rises and cools. This makes Iceland one of the few places where you can walk between two continents. Texas has one of the highest skunk populations in the United States because it has a wide variety of habitats that support its 4 different skunk species, which are the striped skunk, eastern spotted skunk, hog-nosed skunk, and the hooded skunk. Lake Baikal in Russia is the deepest lake in the world, going down over a mile. It holds about 20% of the Earth's unfrozen freshwater, which is more than all the Great Lakes combined. Scientists estimate that it's around 25 million years old. The waters of Loch Ness in Scotland are very dark because of peat that washes from the hills into the loch. Kinda sounds like the perfect hiding spot for creatures living in the depths. The Dead Sea is so salty that you can float without even trying. Its salt concentration is almost 10 times higher than most oceans, making it one of the saltiest bodies of water in the world. The vast majority of Earth's water is salt water found in oceans and seas. Of the small percentage that is freshwater, most is locked up in ice caps and glaciers or stored underground. This leaves a tiny fraction of freshwater accessible for human use. Broadway follows an ancient Native American trail. Unlike the city's grid, Broadway cuts diagonally across Manhattan because it was originally a Lenape trail that predated European settlement. Africa is the only continent that straddles all 4 hemispheres: northern, southern, eastern, and western. This makes it geographically unique, with diverse climates ranging from deserts to tropical rainforests. No matter where you stand, you're always in a distinct part of the world. Alaska is so large that it's bigger than Texas, California, and Montana combined. Even with all that space, it has one of the smallest populations in the United States. Most of it is wilderness, filled with stunning mountains, glaciers, and wildlife. Japan is made up of over 6,800 islands, but most of its population lives on just 4 of them. These main islands house nearly all of the country's cities and farmland, while the rest of the islands range from small fishing villages to even being uninhabited. The Great Barrier Reef is the largest living structure on Earth, stretching over 1,400 miles off the coast of Australia. Again, size isn't even a big deal, but the Great Barrier Reef is so big that it can be seen from space. There are pink dolphins living in the Amazon River. They even blush a brighter shade of pink when they're excited. Greenland is the world's largest island that isn't a continent, and it holds about 10% of the world's freshwater supply. The Nile flows over 4,100 miles from Central Africa to the Mediterranean Sea. It was the lifeline of ancient Egyptians because it provided water, food, and transportation for them, and it's still an important resource for millions of people. The Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean is the deepest point on Earth, plunging nearly 36,000 feet. 36,000, that's about 7,000 feet deeper than Mount Everest is tall. It's a place of crushing pressure, freezing temperatures, and strange deep-sea creatures. Chile is home to the Atacama Desert, the driest desert in the world outside Antarctica. Some weather stations in the Atacama have never recorded rainfall, which makes it a hot spot for astronomers due to its clear, cloudless skies. Venice, Italy, is built on more than 100 small islands connected by canals and bridges. The city has no roads, and boats are the main way to get around. But it's slowly sinking due to rising sea levels and its marshy foundation. Based on surface area, Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake in the world. It's so vast that it could hold all the water from the other Great Lakes and still have room for more. Its size and depth mean it also creates its own weather patterns. The Amazon rainforest produces around 20% of the world's oxygen, earning the nickname the lungs of the earth. It's home to millions of species, many of which haven't even been discovered yet. Despite its importance, it's under threat from deforestation. New Zealand was one of the last major landmasses to be discovered and settled by humans. Its remote location in the South Pacific kept it untouched by humans until around 1250 AD, when Polynesians arrived. Today, it's famous for its stunning landscapes and unique wildlife. The Maldives is the smallest country in Asia, and it's the lowest country in the world, with an average elevation of about 5 feet above sea level. More than 80% of the country's land is composed of coral islands, and it's a hot spot for vacationing because of its beautiful beaches. In other words, just because it's small doesn't mean people don't like it. The tallest waterfall in the world is Angel Falls in Venezuela, with a height of over 3,200 feet. It's so high that much of the water evaporates or turns into mist before it even hits the ground. The falls are located in a remote jungle and were named after an American pilot who discovered them. Florida has more coastline than any state except for Alaska. With over 1,300 miles of coastline, Florida is almost completely surrounded by water. Its beaches stretch along both the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico. Texas and California usually have the most reported ghost sightings, but that's probably because of their large population, and they have tons of old historical sites. But if you consider the number of sightings relative to the population, some smaller states, like Wyoming, actually have higher rates of reported ghost sightings. While California dominates carrot production, other states also contribute to the nation's carrot supply. Some of these include Michigan, Texas, Washington, and Wisconsin. These states have the right climate and agricultural practices for carrot cultivation, but they produce significantly less than California. Africa is home to the second largest freshwater lake in the world, Lake Victoria. It spans an area of almost 69,000 square kilometers, or about 26,500 miles, and is shared by Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya. With just 7 people per square mile, Montana is one of the least densely populated states in the United States. In other words, move there if you hate people. Loch Ness is the largest body of water in Scotland by volume and contains more water than all the lakes in England and Wales combined, and Loch Ness never freezes over, even in the harshest of Scottish winters, as the water cooled from the air will sink and be replaced by hot water below it. Iceland has no mosquitoes. It's one of the only places in the world where you don't have to worry about those buzzing pests. The Arctic Ocean is the smallest and shallowest of all the oceans. Despite its size, it plays a huge role in regulating the Earth's climate. I told you it's all about the motion in the ocean. The Komodo dragon, which is found in Indonesia, is the largest lizard in the world and can grow up to 10 feet long. Africa's Lake Victoria is home to one of the world's most dangerous fish, the Nile perch. It's not dangerous to people, but to the ecosystem. Introduced for fishing, it wiped out hundreds of native fish species in the lake. Greenland is the largest island in the world that isn't a continent. Despite basically being a big chunk of ice, its name comes from Viking settlers trying to attract others to live there. Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake. It's so large that it could cover all of North and South America in a foot of water. There's a place in Venezuela where lightning strikes almost constantly, known as the Catatumbo lightning. This phenomenon happens over Lake Maracaibo nearly 300 nights a year, producing up to 28 strikes per minute. Vatican City is the smallest country in the world. It's so tiny that it's smaller than most neighborhoods, but it has its own government and its own post office. Ethiopia's Danakil Depression is one of the hottest places on Earth. It regularly reaches over 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Its otherworldly landscapes look so bizarre that it's often compared to the surface of Mars. Australia is the wool capital of the world, probably because they have about 70 million sheep and only about 26 million people. New Zealand also has more sheep than people, with around 26 million sheep and only about 5 million people. Beneath Antarctica's thick ice sheet lies Lake Vostok, a hidden freshwater lake that's been sealed off from the surface for about 15 million years. It's buried under more than 2 miles of ice, making it one of the most isolated ecosystems on Earth. Scientists believe it could harbor ancient microbes or even entirely new forms of life that adapted to survive in its extreme, dark, and high-pressure environment. Studying it might even offer clues about life on icy moons on other planets. Niagara Falls isn't just one waterfall. It's actually made of 3: the Horseshoe Falls, American Falls, and Bridal Veil Falls. Together, these waterfalls move over 3,000 tons of water every second. The Alps are still growing. These famous European mountains rise about 1 millimeter every year as tectonic plates push together. They continue to grow even as erosion wears them down. There's a river in Colombia that turns into a rainbow during certain months. It's because of a special plant in the water that creates crazy shades of red, yellow, and green. The Gobi Desert isn't full of sand like the Sahara. It's mostly rock. Its harsh winds and rocky terrain make it one of the most extreme places to visit. Mexico City is sinking because it was built on an old lake. It drops a few inches every year because of water being pumped from underground. I tried to tell you that getting pumped by a few inches is a big deal. India has a floating post office that serves locals and tourists while literally floating on water. Under the Mediterranean Sea lies a lost city that was once a bustling port. It sank thousands of years ago and was rediscovered in the early 1900s. Covering over 160,000 square miles, Australia's Great Victoria Desert is larger than the United Kingdom, and it's one of the most remote places on Earth. The Great Lakes hold more than 20% of the world's fresh water. They're so massive that they can create their own weather. The Dead Sea is shrinking fast. It's losing about 3 feet of water every year due to evaporation and reduced river inflow. If this continues, it could disappear within decades. Iceland runs almost entirely on renewable energy. The country's geothermal and hydropower resources provide nearly all its electricity. China has a stunning red beach covered with seaweed that turns bright red in the fall. The Baltic Sea has underwater forests of algae that provide shelter for fish and other marine life. The Great Wall of China isn't one long wall. It's actually a series of walls and fortifications built by different dynasties over centuries. Similar to my hairline, some parts are well preserved while others have crumbled over time. About 90% of Madagascar's wildlife is unique to the island. Its isolation from mainland Africa created a biodiversity hotspot like no other. Norway has a town where it's illegal to be buried. The permafrost keeps bodies from decomposing, so residents must be flown elsewhere for burial. It's an eerie but practical solution in the Arctic. The Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean is so deep it could fit Mount Everest inside it. At nearly 36,000 feet down, it's a place of crushing pressure and freezing temperatures, yet life still thrives there. New Smyrna Beach in Florida is often called the shark attack capital of the world. It gained this recognition thanks to its warm waters and high fish populations that attract sharks. Lake Baikal in Russia is so clear you can see down to about 130 feet. The Bronx is the only New York City borough connected to the mainland. All the other boroughs, like Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, are either islands or part of Long Island. Montana has some of the oldest fossils in North America and houses one of the largest collections of fossils in the world. The Yellowstone River is also in Montana, and it's the longest undammed river, stretching over almost 700 miles. Slovakia has more castles per capita than almost any other country, although it doesn't have nearly close to the amount of other countries, like Germany, Wales, and Ireland. Italy has a free wine fountain that dispenses wine all day long. It's meant for pilgrims walking a famous religious trail, but anyone passing by can take a sip. Saudi Arabia is the largest country in the world without any natural rivers. It relies entirely on underground aquifers and desalination plants for water. India has a temple dedicated to thousands of holy rats, which are considered sacred. People even eat food that's been nibbled on by the rats for good luck. In Denmark, it's illegal to name your baby certain names, like Monkey and Pluto. Russia is the largest country in the world, followed by Canada and then China. Snake Island, a small island off the coast of Brazil, is home to some of the world's most venomous snakes, including the golden lancehead viper. There's 1 to 2 snakes per 200 square meters, or roughly 25 to 50 snakes per American football field. In Puerto Rico's Mosquito Bay, the water glows at night thanks to tiny organisms called dinoflagellates. Antarctica isn't governed by any country. The Antarctic Treaty was signed by multiple nations to preserve it as a zone for peaceful scientific research. The design of the Sydney Opera House was inspired by orange peels, and it's considered an architectural masterpiece and one of the most recognizable landmarks in the world. Fossil evidence suggests Antarctica had forests millions of years ago, which is a far cry from the frozen environment we see today. Brazil has about 130 species of primates, which is more than anywhere else on Earth, and 83 of those are only found in Brazil. South America is home to the capybara, which is the largest rodent in the world. They can grow to be about 3 to 4 feet long and weigh over 150 pounds. Something that big should be paying taxes. Germany's Oktoberfest began as a royal wedding celebration in 1810, and it's the world's largest beer festival with over 7 million liters of beer consumed each year. The exact purpose of Easter Island's massive statues of stone heads have puzzled historians for centuries. Paris almost said no to the Eiffel Tower when it was built for the World's Fair in 1889. Its critics called it an eyesore, but now it's the ultimate symbol of romance. North America boasts an incredible range of climates, from the frozen tundra of northern Canada to the tropical beaches of the Caribbean. You can ski in the Rockies and relax in the Bahamas without ever leaving the continent. Finland has about 2 or 3 million saunas for a population of just 5.5 million people. Saunas are a cornerstone of Finnish culture because they symbolize relaxation and social bonding. The Canadian Shield is a massive geological shield located on the northeast coast of Hudson Bay, Canada. It has some of the Earth's oldest rocks on Earth. Some are over 4 billion years old. The Wright brothers made history in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, with the first powered flight, although it only lasted a mere 12 seconds. The Appalachian Mountains formed over 480 million years ago, which makes them older than dinosaurs. Peru gave the world the potato, which was cultivated by farmers about 7,000 years ago, and there are thousands of potato varieties still grown in the Andes. With 54 countries, Africa has more countries than any other continent. Each country has its own blend of languages and traditions that create an incredibly rich set of cultures, and with over 2,000 languages spoken, Africa is the most linguistically diverse continent. Some languages even include unique clicking sounds. While Africa is the continent with the most languages, Papua New Guinea has over 800 spoken languages, which makes it the most linguistically diverse country on Earth. Victoria Falls, which is on the border of Zambia and Zimbabwe, is known as the smoke that thunders, with its massive spray that can be seen from miles away. During summer, Antarctica has months of continuous daylight, while in winter it plunges into complete darkness for months. Australia has about 40 to 50 million kangaroos, which means that it has more kangaroos than people if they ever decided to rebel. we'd be in trouble. Italy is famous for its pasta and pizza, but tomatoes only arrived in Europe after being brought from the Americas in the 16th century. Over 4.5 billion people live in Asia, which makes up about 60% of the world's population. China and India alone each have over 1 billion people. Antarctica only has 2 active volcanoes, but plenty of volcanic vents that release gases and vapors into the air. Coffee was first discovered by a goat herder in Ethiopia. Apparently, his goats ate coffee berries and became noticeably energized, and the rest is history and the reason we hit the toilet each morning. Covering almost 44.5 million square kilometers, Asia is the largest continent on Earth. It accounts for about 30% of land on Earth. Antarctica holds the record for the coldest temperature ever recorded, which was negative 128.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or negative 89.2 degrees Celsius. Many things may shrink and look tiny in that weather. Anyways, there are no permanent residents in Antarctica, only scientists and support staff.